My name is Critina Vatulescu, and I'm an associate professor in comparative literature here at NYU, and one of the two co-organizers of the symposium today. Thank you all for coming here this early on this chilly morning. We're really happy you're here, and look forward to everyone's participation in the symposium. It gives me great pleasure to start with thanks to the people who made this event possible. And I'm gonna first start with my co-organizer, Emma, who's right there in the back, and most of you know her. She planted the seed for the symposium as a film series and then had the flexibility and good humor to help it grow into the very different animal that you're taking, let's say event, that you're taking part in today. A special note of thanks also to Anastasia Kastriukova and to Chuck Gelman for their talented and patient work on designing our poster program and website. We thank Wakego Wasike and Jamie Mishkin for their help with the publicity materials. And Heather Jensen from the Jordan Center has provided great administrative support. Thank you to Yosef Kirali and to Colleen Dunn of Subreal for allowing us to use their stunning image from Art History Archive on our poster and on our program. And finally, Kit Frick has assisted us in too many ways to list here, but let me say that we owe it to her that things work as well as they do around here. We are also grateful to our sponsors, the NYU Center for European and Mediterranean Studies, the NYU Center for Department of Comparative Literature, the Jordan Center for the Advanced Study of Russia, the Office of the Dean of the Humanities, and the Romanian Cultural Institute in New York. It also gives me great pleasure to welcome our panelists. Some of you have traveled great distances to be with us here and share your work, so thank you. A special note of welcome to students in both undergraduate and graduate versions of documents, documentary, and fiction seminars, for whom the symposium serves as a capstone experience and a great chance of entering into direct dialogue with some of the researchers whose work we have been reading this semester. You can hear me all right, yes? Great. So we often pay attention to concepts when what they refer to is no longer present, or at least when part of what they refer to is about to disappear or undergo dramatic change. Our colleague Avital Ronel recently started a lecture on authority, reminding us through Hannah Arendt that we attempt to define authority when it is on the wane, when the question is not what is authority, but what was authority. The archive, as Jacques Derrida demonstrates at length in Archive Fever, has much to do with authority, including this. Archives, as we know them, are disappearing or are otherwise being fundamentally displaced and altered. At the same time, new types of archives and discourses about archives are constantly emerging. Just a year ago, in April 2014, a massive conference titled Radical Archives here at NYU brought together a crowd of archivists, curators, artists, and scholars hardly nostalgic about leaving behind the archive as official state repository of documents. Instead, this emerging community turned its attention to what was originally left out of the archives. Part of the conference was dedicated to absence, counter archives, black boxes, the erased, the forgotten. Another conference section on archive ethics considered the archive as first document of revolution and last site of resistance, and brought together the archivists of the Occupy movement with those of the Iranian Green movement and the Arab Image Foundation. Various people assembling, gleaning, reconstructing, or imagining new archives. The very meaning of archive is in the process of being altered, often by the addition of new adjectives: spectral, invisible, diasporic, queer, decolonized, erased, and redacted were some of the words that I picked up from that conference. In the midst of these dramatic shifts in the literal as well as discursive spaces that archives occupy in our culture, our conference title calls attention to media and remediation as a process where revolution and emergence is shadowed by disappearance. In their influential book, Re-Mediation, Understanding New Media, J. David Bolter and Richard Grusin define remediation as, quote, the representation of one medium into another, and distinguish between different types of remediations, repurposing, transparent, translucent, and aggressive remediation, for example. They argue that, quote, what is new about new media is the way that it remediates older media, end of quote, as they see remediation as the process that has been going on for centuries. For example, early film remediating theater, literature, and various public entertainments or attractions. The authors also see remediation operate in both directions. While digital media remediate film and TV, films also remediate digital special effects. For a reason that escapes me, archives are largely absent in Bolter and Grusin's remediation, yet archival remediation is in full swing. Our time is not the first time in history that, quote, the traditional text-based concept of the archive is being revolutionized, end of quote. As Paula Ahmad here, in her book, Counter Archive, Film, the Everyday, and Albert Kahn's Archive de la Planète shows us in great detail, the advent of film with, quote, its excessive evidentiary powers, end of quote, already brought in such a revolution at the other turn of the 20th century, the turn from the 19th to the 20th century. The turn from the 20th to the 21st century has been witnessing another image-driven revolution in the still largely text-based concept of the archive at an unprecedented scale and pace. The original impetus for this symposium was to bring together people working on different archival revolutions in order to encourage cross-revolutionary dialogues that may not ordinarily happen. Now, when your alarm went off this morning, maybe you didn't think that you were going to engage in cross-revolutionary dialogues, but that's my secret agenda today. The hope was that we could get some perspective on our present-day archival revolution by considering previous such turning points, while at the same time becoming aware of how our present position shapes our vested interests in this particular past. An archival revolution that has preoccupied some of the participants in this conference is the archival revolution that followed the first televised revolutions in the world, the more and oftentimes less velvety revolutions of 1989 in Eastern Europe. Having a revolution be televised live and be fought around a TV station was a first in the history of the moving image. Furthermore, the circulation of images in Eastern Europe was one of the domains in which the effects of the 1989 revolutions were most immediately visible. To give you an example, in Romania, we went from just 2 hours of one state-sponsored TV channel a day to a media overload of satellites dishing out the dozens of channels of multiple foreign countries within months, if not days. We had the TV ads for consumer products way before the things themselves started arriving on the market. However, the archival revolution that followed 1989 in Eastern Europe were still largely textual. The opening of vast archives amassing in the region for the previous 50 or to 100 years caused an informational deluge whose ripples shaped politics at the highest level and penetrated deeply in the private lives of ordinary citizens. While the post-revolutionary period was largely focused on dealing with the often critical information available in these new archives, and often with the questions of what was missing in these overflowing archives, we are, I believe, witnessing a second wave in the reception of these archives. In this second wave, questions of rhetoric, interpretation, and medium surface to the fore. We are becoming more aware of the treasure trove of miscatalogued, overlooked, and sometimes downright destroyed images. These images have often been hiding in plain sight in the largely text-based archives, left dormant by the absence of projection rooms and technologies. Bits of negatives or film stock decaying at the same rate as the human body. As Yuri Tsivian reminds us, the lifespan of celluloid film approximates that of the human ideal, 100 years. For too long, the textually focused interpreters of these archives have brushed these images aside or used them for the occasional quaint illustration. However, more recently, these images have also started receiving attention in academia, which follows sometimes at a lag modes of engagement and intervention into these archives that have been most visible in the arts. Our guests today, straddling the divide between academia, archive, and the arts, are among people responsible for pushing our understanding of the archive beyond the long dominant textual model, moving other media outside of the persistent blind spots. Since part of the lure of archives has to do with arche, authority, but also beginnings, origins, and stories of beginnings, I feel compelled to end these remarks by telling you one story about the beginnings of the symposium. Some of it originated many years ago with this X-ray image and this collage effect produced by its superimposition over a medical form, a hospital release form, a forced labor camp work log, an empty page fragment, and a tribunal sentence. Its miniature butterfly shape with precisely articulate yet to me dark shadings suddenly asked for the kind of attention that the mountains of oversized yellow paper had long ago dulled. At the top, where the paper clip had carelessly attached to the file for decades, the shades of gray had been scratched into a shimmer I had never seen in the archive, an iridescent purple. My pulse, barely making it under the tediousness of the previous 53 pages of the file, started racing. At first, I tried to rein my pulse by forcing my eyes back to the text, reminding myself that I was there to read, figure out answers to my research questions, which had nothing to do with X-rays. And yet the image followed me, asking a question that all files ask, only in a sharper way for all its cloudiness. What was I doing in the archive? Why was I privy to looking at it? What belongs and what doesn't belong in the archive? What is in and what is out, as Emma Hamilton put it in the title of our last panel? This question included not just the objects archived, often traces of the body, but also the perceiving body, my own in this case. This cloudy image also brought into focus questions about the modes of attention solicited by the archive, about the archived body and the sensorium of the person whose gaze meets the files, about what constitutes, quote, the ground, the archival base or media, and what it stores, to quote from Sven Speaker's Big Archive, and about the media, technologies, and ethics that went into file production, and the media, technologies, and ethics that go into file reception. The panels today all tackle and further nuance such questions and many others about the coming together of images, text, and bodies in the archive. So let's take leave of this image to the extent that it will let us, and delve straight into the first panel, Eyes to the East, Art and Archives in Eastern Europe and Russia. Thank you.